I'm no good at taking good advice, and I'm self-careless, so don't tell me twice that lately I've been so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless.
Hey everyone, welcome to Self-Helpless. I'm Delanie Fischer, and today I'm chatting with the hosts of the Almost 30 podcast, Krista Williams and Lindsey Simcik, and we're talking about some of the things shared in their new book, which comes out tomorrow, titled Almost 30, A Definitive Guide to a Life You Love for the Next Decade and Beyond. Lindsey and Krista are also sharing some of their favorite takeaways from podcast guests throughout the years, modalities that have helped them the most, and we also discuss the rewarding and challenging parts of experiencing life transitions while having a public platform, including determining how to share personal information and how that can evolve over time. I really appreciated their honesty about their experience having a long-term friendship and a creative and business partnership with each other, and the things they have in place in order to continue to check in and stay on the same page as they co-create. So here is my chat with Krista and Lindsey. So, I love chatting with podcasters who have been doing this a while because we have this unusual experience of going through transitions in kind of a public way for people to hear, learn from, criticize at times. You know, it can be a really great experience, but also uncomfortable. And I would just love to get a snapshot of where each of you were at when you started the podcast, you know, health, relationships, career, whatever you want to share, and where you're at now. Of course, we'll get into the details of how you got there.
Well, it was a time on our closet floors. So Lindsay and I were basically at our rock bottoms, I would say, when we first started Almost 30, and we had no intention of it becoming anything. We just were two friends that were deepening our friendship, really getting to know each other, and found each other in these really deep, meaningful conversations. And we felt at this rock bottom that we were alone. And so when we started the show, our intention was to feel less alone, was to go deeper in our relationship, go deeper in the topics we were discovering around spirituality and wellness. Me personally, I was at a point where I was felt really lost and I wanted to find purpose. I was in the corporate world, which I didn't feel aligned to, I didn't feel excited by, I didn't feel connected to. And I felt like my life was just meaningless. I felt like I wanted to find purpose and I wanted to serve in some bigger way, but I didn't know what that looked like. And I didn't know what that would be like. And so it just felt like this Groundhog's Day of corporate jobs, purposeless life, and feeling like my life had no meaning. And so when we found each other in our connection, I just felt like at least I have this friendship and this relationship that I feel really seen by, that I feel really safe in. And so I would say I was definitely at like a point where I felt really lost and confused. And I felt like, I didn't know where my life would go, but I was following what felt good. And that was our connection together.
What about you, Lindsey?
Yeah, it was a time where I felt like I should have been farther along in my life. I had done all the things. I had, you know, placed myself on a path that everyone told me I should place myself on. I wanted to be an actress. And so I went to school for this and I studied that. Um, I also thought I would be like close to being married by at that point in my late 20s. I thought I should have more money in the bank. I thought I should have my health more under control. I just thought I should have been farther along. Why the heck didn't I learn this in school or from my parents? Just feeling a little bit resentful, a little bit confused, and just frustrated. And, I met Krista at a time when I was living in LA. I was teaching 15 soul cycle classes a week, just running my body into the ground.
Oh, yeah.
And I was, dating a bunch of people, all people who, treated me pretty poorly. I was settling for bad behavior. And I just wasn't listening to the whispers of my body and of my soul. Yeah, it was a time where I just felt very disconnected from myself. And so when I met Krista and we were having these conversations about what was going on with us, it was like the first conversation with a friend that I had really about like what was going on with me on like a deep level, not just like,
Right.
this guy didn't text me back. It was like, yeah, I'm just feeling like really lost. I'm feeling disconnected. I'm feeling like there should be more here. So it was these deep conversations that like gave me that sense of healing even in those early days. And when Krista came to me and was like, we should start a podcast about like what we're talking about, I was like, absolutely. I mean, that would be so natural, so fun. We're doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And the rest has kind of blossomed from there.
Amazing. I resonate with both of you so much. When I started this, I started with two of my friends who are no longer part of the show anymore, but they really knew what they wanted to do. And I felt like the lost one. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but this is really fun. And I'm hoping to figure it out along the way. So now, several years later, what are you both really grateful that you've kind of figured out for yourself? I know it's ever evolving, but you're like, thank God I'm no longer at that point in my 20s.
Yeah, I'm actually really grateful you brought up the example of your podcast with your co-host because I think it's a great, prevents a great example of like sometimes people are on their path that's their truth and their soul and that they
Right.
go through in their life, but sometimes they're kind of following a path that's presented for them from their parents or society. And
Right.
Almost 30, we wrote the book because a lot of times people are on that path and it's not necessarily their soul's path. So you being lost or me being lost or Lindsay being lost, although it's so painful during the time, it's so purposeful and it's so right. And I think sometimes when you're lost, it really means you're living a soul led life because you want to find that purpose, you want to find that destination, or you want to find that meeting. So just like reflecting back to you that it's such a beautiful thing that you felt that lost feeling, or at least that's what I tell myself. I feel like for me, where I've found more of myself in this process is probably just really coming to a place of peace with where I am and peace with the fact that my life will change and evolve and that my relationships are going to change. I'm going to lose friends. I'm going to gain friends. And I'm going to sometimes feel on purpose. I'm sometimes not. And so when we can find that like relationship with self and internal family systems, a psychotherapy technique that I practice, it's called self, capital S self, then everything else on the outside that doesn't make sense, that doesn't feel perfect, that doesn't feel like what it's supposed to be is okay. And so a lot of times my inner voice can be like, I should be more successful or making more money, or I should be married, like what Lindsay says. I can just know that like I'm actually on the right path. It doesn't have to look like everyone else or it doesn't have to look like perfect, but I can feel at peace knowing that I'm following what my soul wants me to follow.
Right. You don't have to know the million steps to come. Just that this is feeling right for right now, and we'll kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, I always say that like feeling good is the only sign you need. I think for so many of us, we can look for so many signs. I know there was one point in time with my dad who's really sick. He has Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and we were
Yeah.
looking for a home for him, in his process of getting more ill. And when looking for a home, I was like, I need a sign. Is it this home? Is it this home? And I was like, you know what? Like we feel really good in this specific home, and us feeling good here is the only sign that we need right now. And so I've kind of applied that to my life where I just allow the feeling of feeling really good to be the only sign that I need to know that I'm on the right path.
And I think for me, I've just learned, especially through my Saturn return, that my most valued and deep relationships aren't going to be the ones that are like the easiest, and that it rings true for friendships and romantic relationships. I thought that when I would find my person that I would be with for the rest of my life, I thought that it would be easy and it would just feel like flow and like, smooth sailing from there.
Sure.
But what happens when you meet your soulmates in your life, whether romantic or friendship or even, family, I feel like you have a soulmate connection with your family too. They will bring up so much. They will bring up aspects of your being that just need to be tended to. They will bring up lessons and healing, and they are the greatest vehicle for growth. And I wish I knew that in my 20s. I know it now and I'm grateful. I had to experience a contrast, but I wish I knew that those like sticky moments in certain relationships and even the like very fleeting relationships all had some sort of lesson for me. And it wasn't always just about like, oh, pick the wrong person again. It was like, like what's here for me? What can I
Yeah.
learn in this moment? And so now, I take it as a really good sign when in the relationships that mean a lot to me, we have like challenging moments or we have growth moments or we're kind of like up leveling and moving through seasons of change together and growing through it rather than just letting the change get the best of us and letting our egos get in the way. It's really just such a gift to move through those moments and those seasons with someone that you're close to.
Yes.
Hmm.
And I love what you said, that reminder that, yeah, soulmates doesn't have to be romantic. You meet somebody that you feel like you've known forever, and that's such a special thing. And I know people can get upset that they maybe haven't found a certain romantic soulmate partner or whatever. But if you look around at, family or friends or people that have made you feel really connected is so important as well. And you mentioned something about Saturn return. Can you tell us what exactly that is or what that means?
Yeah, your Saturn return is an astrological event. So even if people are not like so gun ho on astrology, it's okay. But this is something that everyone moves through about every 27 to 29 and a half years. Saturn, the planet, comes back to the place it was when you were born in the sky. And
Oh,
Saturn, I know, think about that for a moment.
fascinating.
Takes about 27 years to rotate all the way around back to that place. And Saturn is a planet that's kind of like this father figure. It is a taskmaster of sorts, put in, a more intense title. But really, I've found that Saturn is this really loving, tough love type planet that wants you to take an honest look at your life and discern what is working and what is not, what is aligned for you, what is not, what feels good, what doesn't, what feels like you and what doesn't. And, best case scenario, you have, some challenges that really kind of bring you to your knees, that crack you open so much so that you're really able to discover who you really are, really meet the real you. Because up until that point, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, you know, you kind of think of yourself related to how your parents viewed you, or how you were, treated in school, or how society views the type of person that you are. There's so many influences while we're growing up. And this is kind of like, the real individuation. I think, we experience like the teenage years where we're like, F you, mom. It's like, this is the individuation that on the other side of this, we will truly meet ourselves and never ever, hopefully, abandon ourselves again. We will always know what it feels like to stand by ourselves, to know what our soul speak sounds like, to be in our bodies. And it's just really such an opportunity, even though in the moment, the human can experience this as like your life is falling apart. It is actually coming together.
You said it's every 29 years that Saturn situation happens?
So it's happening around 27 and a half, all the way through till, depends on your chart, about 30, sometimes 31. So you can go to our
Wow.
website, almost30.com/calculator, and you can calculate your Saturn return and understand when it is happening. You will go through cycles. There are on periods and off periods. The on periods are on. They're on, like, what do the kids say? Like Donkey Kong?
Sure, that sounds right.
It's intense. And then you'll experience a period of like respite in the wake of that. And oftentimes that's a good time for integration and peace. But it
Wow.
might go through a few little waves, big waves during your Saturn return.
Oh my gosh. So we might be experiencing this kind of weird little shift a few times in our life with
Mhm.
something like that. Now, not only because when you approach 30, it's like that number that might feel different, but something's actually happening astrologically. That's fascinating. Krista, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I want to hear your experience in that period, like, because it's kind of fun to track like what was going on from 27 to 30 for
Oh,
you. I'd love
yeah.
to hear. And then just wanted to say this quick thing too. So not
Yeah.
only is the Saturn return an astrological event, but in your later 20s, your prefrontal cortex is coming online. So you have this opportunity for conscious thinking, for conscious awareness. So you are really coming to the place where you're conscious of who you are, how you're relating to the world, of the job you're in, the relationships you're in. And for a lot of us, we're living unconsciously for most of our lives, just from the programming, from what everyone told us what to do. So that was me. I woke up in this job in the corporate world where I was like, everyone told me this was a great job. I would make money. I would be successful. But now I'm consciously aware and I'm like, oh, I don't like this at all. I don't feel
Yeah.
good. I don't feel like myself. So there's brain development things happening and there's astrology during this time. And if me and Lindsey would have known that there was so much happening both cosmically and internally, we would have been so much more set up for success and probably saved ourselves so many tears and so much pain. And that's a lot why we wrote the book Almost 30. But I'd love to hear, what was your journey in your later 20s? Like, what was going on for you?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's just so interesting that, yeah, like the frontal lobe, Saturn,
Yeah.
the societal
Yeah.
expectations of 30. So I had just been able to start working for myself at 28. So I left my corporate job. I literally launched a business called Dicks by Delanie where I painted penis cartoons on coffee mugs. So that's a different,
Hey, say
that
no more,
story for a
friend.
different side.
Say no more.
I
That's
was like,
Saturn return. You're like corporate job, like I'm gonna paint dicks. You're like,
yes,
Fuck the man.
yeah, literally, my
exactly.
soul's calling me to dicks.
So that was a highlight of going into giving my 2 weeks notice basically and saying I am going to be a full-time penis artist. But that was, I was really trying to break out of that workaholic cycle that I was in of my 20s of just being go, 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 doing and not thinking about why I was doing, if I was enjoying anything. And I saw entrepreneurship as my way out. And then, of course, I'm in entrepreneurship, realizing, holy shit, now I'm just a workaholic at home. And now, what am I going to do with this situation? And so I just slowly kind of started removing things from my workload over the course of those years. And now I just turned 35. And now I really am in this place where I don't like to call it the bare minimum, but I want to do as little as needs to be done for me to do what I enjoy doing. Like I don't want to be overly visible, but visible enough to, get the book deal and have the podcast and make money doing it, but I don't want to like over expose myself. And so I've been able to kind of find that balance, it can be tough, but that's the biggest difference I think is like I'm not trying to do everything to the heightened degree. I'm really picking and choosing what level of, I don't know, like energy and
Yeah.
also visibility and attention I want. I don't know. Do you find
Yeah.
that has been similar for each of you?
What I think is I've had a similar path. And what I think so beautiful about that is that's healthy. Like I'm living a life I'm satisfied with my success level. You're not always wanting more. You're not unconsciously just trying for more because there's a little girl in you that wants to prove to her mother that she's, these things. And I
Right.
just love what you shared because I think that's such a lesson for me and everyone listening. Like our goal is to live lives that we love, of freedom, of peace, of rest, of respite. And we can have success and not seek for more all the time to have that. And I was someone that was really burning myself out in my later 20s. Like when we started almost 30, I was working a full time job. Lindsay was as well. And so, I mean, the way that I was harming my body, my relationships, just because I had to succeed, I had to have more, I had to create, I have all these things.
Yeah.
And even when we became entrepreneurs full time, I had to be honest with myself where I was like, oh, I actually created another prison for myself. When I was in the corporate world, I was like, oh, this is like a prison. I'm at my desk and then I'm here and they make me work all the time. And then I'm an entrepreneur and I'm making myself work all the time. I'm never resting. I'm just nonstop. And I think when we can be really honest with ourselves about the values that we have, and we talk about this in the book, but when you're run by your values, and if I had a value of freedom, and that's a lot why I became an entrepreneur, but yet I'm making myself work 60 plus hours a week. I'm never giving myself a break. It's never enough. I've created my own prison for myself and I'm not living in alignment with my values. So, yeah, I mean, we can relate to a lot. And the visibility piece, what I'll say is that I've had to come into right relationship with I'm just going to be as much as who I came here to be. And if that means I'm visible, great. And if that doesn't, great. But what I can do is focus on me and my own alignment and not focus on how other people perceive me. But that's so much of my work, to be honest.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
Well, I was just gonna say, it sounds like, during that time you were able to access somewhat of an inner voice or like an intuition more so than you had before, where, you might have been on a track that was like, do the most to get the most or get to where I want to go. And then there's a point, and I would love for you to confirm or deny this, but I think
Yeah.
then there's a point where, there's something that's telling you, I don't know why I'm doing this, like that
Right.
just starts to ask little questions, and the soul will do that. It speaks through your intuition and it'll just start to ask, these very like quiet questions of like, who are you without, all the accolades at work? And, I think we start to live those questions rather than, get stressed out about them. I think we just start to experiment. And in your case, it's like, let's actually pull back a little bit and not do the absolute most and see how it feels. And then I think that's what's so beautiful about this time in our lives, in our late 20s and 30s. It's giving ourselves permission to experiment,
Right.
without that fear of, messing everything up. I think when we have a trust in ourselves, we have a greater ability and a greater confidence to experiment, and
Yeah.
I think, you've really illustrated that with your career.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but it's almost like once I learned about one layer of conditioning, it just became this like layered cake of shit, right? It's like,
Mhm.
okay, the way that you're conditioned as a woman, okay, capitalism, okay, childhood experiences shaped you. I mean, was there a turning point of when you heard a bit of information that unlocked something for you, whether it was on the podcast or outside of the podcast, that you felt like, okay, I'm never going to be the same after hearing this?
Mm.
It's funny for me. I was talking about this just the other day. I was actually in high school when I heard something. So when I was in high school, I hung out with this group of guys all the time. So I had this really beautiful opportunity to just have really honest reflections back to me with men. Like sometimes, men just kind of say what it is. And I remember I was getting in car accidents a lot. I probably got in 3 or 4 in a year, like some fender benders, nothing too crazy. But I remember telling my best guy friend at the time, Brandon, I was like, I keep getting in car accidents. I'm so unlucky. And he's like, you are the common denominator here. He's like, it's not luck. You are causing the accident. And it was
Mm.
such a weird thing because it just completely got me up out of my sleep. And, I hope the audience has had those moments where you're like, you have a friend that gives you really honest feedback or a relationship that's meaningful that just wakes you up to the story that you've been telling yourself. Because I was thinking that reality was happening to me or life was happening to me, and that it wasn't me that was really causing the accidents or causing my reality. And when
Mhm.
he told me this, it just completely reframed where I was like, wow, I am the common denominator of my life and I'm the common denominator in my reality. So that was such a moment for me where I was like, whoa, I need to take full responsibility for my life and how I'm living it. And this actually can be really empowering where I'm creating a life that I love rather than just being someone that's just victim to all these situations that happen to me.
And what did you do differently, Krista, after hearing that? Like, did you drive differently? Did you
No,
like what?
yes, no more car
What
accidents.
happened?
I started paying attention while driving. I didn't eat breakfast while driving. I was turned down the music, slowed down. Yes, I actually drove better. And what
Mm.
also happened to me after that was just a realization that, my conscious awareness and my presence was required for my life. So before then, I was just kind of like asleep, just very much in my emotions, in my thoughts. I'm someone that's a deep feeler. I'm very existential. I'm very intuitive. So I was just kind of living in my own feeling reality. And it kind of brought me into my body and brought me into reality in a way that I could be consciously aware of how I was engaging with life. So I've continued to have to come back to that feeling, but it was the first time where I could become in my body and consciously aware of how I was engaging with life. They
Thanks,
were like,
Brandon.
they were tough love friends. I tell you what, they never took their feet off the gas of the tough love, but it was
That's
so helpful.
dudes.
Literally.
Dudes are so key for that.
So
Like my
direct.
girlfriends would be like, "It's okay, girl. I know. I'm sorry about the accidents." Like da 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 da. But he's like, "No, you're a bad driver.
You're the
You need
problem.
to, yeah, you're the problem." I'm like, oh.
For me, it was more gradual. I didn't have like one moment, but I do think the spark was the moment I decided to start therapy. I started therapy in 2017, I believe, 17, maybe early 18. So we had already started the podcast, but I decided this was a worthwhile investment that I wanted to make in myself, even though honestly at the time I was like struggling to pay my bills and make rent and all the things. But I think I really knew deep down that this would be a worthwhile investment for so many reasons I didn't know at the time, but I just felt it deeply. And so I began my therapy journey. And, as one does, you start to discover why you are the way you are currently.
Yeah.
And it just, yeah, it didn't shatter my world. It honestly brought light because I think I had been walking around feeling like I'm just this type of person, like kind of I have been deemed this type of person and this is what I am and I cannot change. I don't know why I felt that way, but I did. And to understand the origins of, parts of my anxiety or, why I was showing up to certain relationships the way I was, or why I was choosing people to be in relationship with or situationships with, or why I felt so much anxiety and pressure around, my career in acting and where that stems from and why I felt like it was still like relevant for me. Um, it was a slow unpacking through, traditional therapy, EMDR, and the likes. And honestly, during that time too, concurrently, the podcast was happening. So we were bringing on guests who were blowing my mind on the daily.
Yeah.
It was such a, it still is a rich time, but it was at that point in my life where I didn't know a ton. Um, it just felt so rich. I was like, wow, I'm discovering things about myself in therapy. And then I'm getting the tools from these people on the podcast. And, also we would have opportunities to go to ayahuasca and, like, we were, like, stripping back the layers, and, I feel so grateful because during that time, I really felt like I was able to, through so many different modalities, um, peel back the layers to, like, who I really am, and I remember sitting in the ayahuasca ceremony, one of them, um and, this is what I'll say about plant medicine. Um, it's something that you shouldn't force, I don't believe. I believe that, like, the medicine will find you, and if it's meant to happen, it will happen. But I find that these kind of trendy things are sometimes things we think we should do because everyone else is doing them, but
Yeah.
ayahuasca really found us at a time in our lives where it felt aligned. It was a very gentle experience for me, but I just remember sitting under the stars, after one of the ceremonies, and I just remember feeling the, like, infinite deep love of God and the universe for, like, who I really am, and it just made me feel deep love for myself. It was just this, like, very all-encompassing feeling that I really hadn't deeply felt before.
Mm.
Um, and I was never the same after that. It was kind of this once you know this thing or once you feel that thing, you can never not know. And
Yeah.
so slowly it started to, like, inch its way into moments in my waking life of, like, the person who has poor behavior that you're going on a date with, like, hey, you actually have a choice to respect yourself and honor yourself and love yourself through saying, this isn't really working. Like, I'd rather
Yeah.
not go on another date with you. So it was gradual for me over time through many different modalities, but it was definitely during that late 20s period that, everything changed.
Coming from the acting world, are there parts of that that you miss, or do you feel like you've been able to integrate it into what you do now, that it kind of scratches the itch of whatever you liked about that part of your life?
Yeah, I was just talking about this with a friend, and it's so interesting to look back on all of the careers and jobs that I've had throughout my life. Um, and looking back, I'm able to understand how each one of those was incredibly valuable in teaching me things, nurturing skills that I needed for the next thing. And so, acting was a really beautiful long period of my life where I fully immersed myself in the process of, learning different techniques and really honing my craft, as they say, and taking all the classes and just really investing time, energy, and love into what I thought I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But I realized at I would say in my early 30s, I really realized, like, actually was, able to digest this truth was that I was, pursuing an expired dream for a bit. It was my
Mm,
dream for a while, and then it expired, but then I was still pushing. And I
yeah.
think what the podcast showed me, which was so beautiful, is that, you can have a vision for your life. But oftentimes it's pretty narrow compared to what God, spirit, universe has in store for you. And I just love the fact that I have training in, voice and movement and performance and um a multitude of other things that have served me in so many ways in this world of the podcast.
Yeah.
And it just blows my mind that I was literally waiting for years to be chosen by casting directors. And now, you know, I one day decided with Krista that we were going to create something ourselves and not
Right.
wait around. And when it's right, it's right. And it does flow. It doesn't mean it didn't come with challenges, but it really did flow.
Hot quotable. Are you pursuing an expired dream? I love that. And it's so interesting. Myself and my former co-host, Taylor and Kelsey, we actually started this podcast because we were waiting to hear about a TV pilot that we were all part of. We were going to be playing sisters on a TV show potentially. And that didn't happen, but this did. This kind of took off. So it's so interesting of like you're waiting around to see if you're getting chosen and then you actually choose yourself. And that's the thing that propels you forward. Having a podcast for as many years as, you know, we've all had, there's been so many transitions I know for myself with the podcast, whether it's format changes, hosts going from 3 to 1. I mean, topics that you are excited to cover and then maybe feel like you're kind of done with that topic. I'm so curious to learn about your transitions with the podcast itself and maybe what you learned from different seasons of that.
Yeah, the podcast has had it's such a journey, and you know, it's been such a reflection of us. When Lindsey and I first met, we were doing the most. We had at least 4 segments on the show. In our first episode, you'll hear us talk for 20 minutes and then we're like, okay, we're going to get into it now. And we had said nothing for 20 minutes and we're like, all right, it's time to get started. And we were like, all the segments it was 100, not 100, which was like true things, not true things, cool things that we learned, you know, just like this kind of mess. But it was really like something we wanted to create and do. And it was cringe. And for anyone listening, it's like, just start, even if it feels cringe. Like, I'm so grateful for the cringe that we've had over the years. So it was first dating and relationships and kind of like how messy our life was and how lost we were. And then over the years, you know, after talking about sex and dating for so long, it kind of gets a little stale and old, at least for us. It felt like we had kind of moved beyond that. And then we moved to health and wellness because we wanted to really figure out how to love our bodies, how to exist and optimize our life. And I think there probably was the goal at that point to use health as a vehicle for more productivity or for success or something like that. And then once you kind of go beyond health and wellness, you come to soul and you come to spirituality because there's so much more than the physical body. And there's so much more than just being well for vanity's sake. It's like, I want to be well because my soul has something to say. And so the past year or so, or maybe 2 years of the show have been really spirituality and soul focused. And then, you know, we also bring as much humor as we can, you know, to keep it light and interesting. And I think in our work, because we've been doing this work for so long and we've brought on a lot of topics in the industry, we've kind of made them more popular. At some point, you kind of get sick of talking about all the work and you kind of get sick of talking about self-development. And you're like, we kind of want to be silly and just kind of be ourselves. So it's such a thing that has represented us and the evolutions and changes we've been through and the things we want to talk about. But it's always been authentic to where we are and in our relationship, really, because as much as we talk about different things and topics and have different guests on, it really is about the relationship that Lindsey and I have and the chemistry that we have together and our connection as best friends. And that's why people started listening on the closet floors. And that's why they will listen, is because we have such a deep love and respect for one another and a true dedication to showing up, even when we're uncomfortable or even when we're scared or even when we're going through something, and being honest with our audience.
Totally makes sense. I feel you.
Yeah.
I feel you very hard on all that.
You know, being honest and authentic and being seen by people and being truthful. It's not comfortable all the time. And I'm not perfect. I've said the wrong thing. I've done the wrong thing. I have 10 years now of hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours of recorded conversations of me. So it's something that, you know, I'm grateful we've made it this far, but it isn't always comfortable to be seen and put yourself out there. So for anyone listening, it's not like a space that like I think ever gets okay. You just kind of get used to it.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, for anyone like starting something new, to expect the evolution of your creation.
Right.
I think sometimes we get a little tripped up when the thing that we initially create wants to evolve. And I think we do the same thing to ourselves. I think we're very critical of ourselves when we're kind of feeling that itch of change and we're like, oh God, that would mean like that would affect this relationship and I would have to like maybe potentially move or leave my job or have a hard conversation with a family member.
Mm,
I think that like itch of change can feel so uncomfortable. Um, but if you're feeling called, whether it's the creative thing is calling you or you are feeling the call within, it's a must. It's really that call from the next level of you or the next iteration of the creative thing to step forward. So I'm so I'm so glad that we always answered the call, and to be honest, it's much easier when you have a partner doing it. So having Krista to have
yeah.
those conversations, to be like, "Okay, how does this feel? What's the plan? Are we just gonna jump and trust?" Like, was so, so integral to my experience to have, a counterpart to move through that.
Are there any systems that you both have had together to kind of set or reset expectations as needed with the podcast? I know that when I think about when I first started this with Taylor and Kelsey, the expectations were pretty clear in the sense that like this was never going to be their first love. Like stand up was always number one and podcast was maybe number two, but things kind of like shifted through
Mhm.
the years because of personal stuff or career stuff. How do you guys stay on the same page with the podcast while allowing each other to do individual pursuits? How does that all work or how has that changed over time? Anything that you want to share?
It's been a journey. I'm sure we both have things to say about this. I think it's been such a cool vehicle for growth, my relationship with Krista, for so many reasons, but I think this point in particular that you're talking about where, you know, we have found ourselves in different seasons of our lives. We do right now. We did when we started the podcast, but
Mhm.
we've always been generally on the same page about the podcast itself and our mission and what we're creating. And oftentimes what we've learned, I think, over the years is that one of us usually will have a vision for something and kind of bring it forward um, for discussion and for just collaboration. And oftentimes there's a leading energy happening between either of us. So one person will feel like really clear about a vision, and the other will support, maybe ask questions, facilitate it happening, and we'll usually switch on and off with this. It
Mm,
really depends. For example, Krista in the beginning was just such a integral piece in creating our business itself. She was in the corporate world before and just really had a business acumen that was very, very helpful in establishing us as like legit business. And so I really allowed her to lead. I was working through my own insecurities during that time, but I did allow for that, leading there, and then I was there to kind of support and execute on anything that needed to be done in that realm. And there have been times where, like, my vision for aspects of the production of the podcast, like, I'm feeling like we need to change this. And so I lead on that. And there's countless examples of this, but we really learn to trust each other. We really
mm,
learn to carve out our own lanes so that we're not overcompensating and trying to do it all. I know that
yeah.
Krista has her genius in a handful of lanes. My genius lives over here. And so we're able to actually get a ton done, but also feel really confident in what we're doing and not feeling like the other is kind of like, "Hey, I'll help with that," or I'll do that too. It really gives us a lot of energy and support in what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then the third, I think most importantly, and people can use this in friendship, in entrepreneurship, is our ability to come together and have clearing conversations when things are a little sticky. So if things feel unclear, if there's a tension or distortion or a miscommunication, anything funky, and it happens, it will happen. We come together and have a clearing conversation, which we talk about in the book. And this is a conversation that where the intention is to clear any distortion, to be respectful and honor the other person's experience, and also respect and honor your own, to communicate honestly and as clearly as possible. And not feel like you need to solve everything in this conversation.
Yeah.
And so we've come together and done this on walks for years. And it's been so effective. And it's actually a really safe haven for us. We know that we can access it and schedule it. And I feel like we haven't carried that resentment, maybe like we used to. We know we can have this conversation. We know how to do it. We know how effective it is. And we'll just bring, these feelings and thoughts to a conversation like this and know at this point that like it will be like a beautiful therapy session. We know
Yeah.
we have just the love and the tenderness and kindness in these conversations with the intention
Yeah.
of like, let's clear this up and get really, really honest.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Krista, anything to add to that?
About the clearing conversations that Lindsay was just saying is I think sometimes in relationship, we can come and have this idea that's actually like a non-truth. So as an example with Lindsay and I, one of the clearing conversations we had years ago was my belief that I cared about the business more than she did because I didn't see her expressing in the business the same way I was. So it's actually my perception that everyone's going to act like how I act if they care about something. But
Um,
that's actually not true. So she cares about the business a lot, but in her own unique way because she's a different person. So when we come together in clearing, it's helping us to see the truth. She's like, I care about the business and that's why I'm doing this. And I'm like, I care about the business. That's why I'm doing this. So we can come to the truth together of like, oh, I understand. We both care in different ways. And when you work in relationships to find the truth together of we both love each other, we're both working towards a common goal. How can we just clear the distortions that we have about things and come back together in the truth? But, all that to say, this isn't easy work. Like you're committing to deep relationship and intimacy with someone. And I don't know if I was ready for that until I met Lindsay. Lindsay's been such a barometer for me about depth and intimacy in relationships. And it's the most beautiful, fulfilling thing, but it really is something that takes time and tenderness. And I think for a lot of us, it's not something we're used to experiencing because it's it's such a rare thing to have a really deep, true, intimate relationship, especially a friendship among women, because women friendships can be hard.
Yeah. Well, it's just a testament. I mean, like the relationship is like a marriage, basically. This
Yeah.
long with a business partnership and a friendship and the ebbs and flows of life and career and
Mhm.
pursuing other interests. Obviously, you guys have navigated that beautifully. It's still going and it's going strong, and you were able to write a book together. And I think I just really appreciate the honesty around your response because it's not all pretty sexy and cute. There's tough conversations and there's insecurities that come up, and I just appreciate you sharing what you did. I know that for me having the podcast, it's just learning has been built into my weekly schedule, which has been incredible. I mean, it has impacted every area of my life to learn from my guests and the topics that come up and all that stuff. I'm curious to know if there's any specific conversations you've had on the podcast, maybe even from the early years that have stuck with you as a turning point in each of your growth in some way. I know that there's millions, but maybe something that kind of felt like this feels pivotal.
What I would say, there's been so much, and I know this. It's like there's actually a part of me that had to stop applying every single thing every guest said to
Yes.
my life. Like I
Yes.
remember like the second year in, I was vegan, keto, going to plant medicine, running around to cold therapy and saunas and seeing every healer. Like I was just
Yes.
like,
Yes.
where am I? Who am I? What's going on? So I actually had to scale back on all of that and kind
Right.
of just take what I wanted and left. So even for anyone listening, a lot of your listeners are probably people that consume podcasts and stuff. It's like, if you feel called to something, take it and leave the rest. Like, don't try and apply everything that works for everyone else. Like, what
Mm.
works for you will work for you and trust that. Don't try and do everything. So I've actually had to let go of things more so than I've had to take them on. But the thing that's been so impactful for me and is like integrated and weaved in almost all aspects of my life is internal family systems, which I think I mentioned
Mm.
earlier, which
Yeah.
is by Dick Schwartz. So he has a really powerful book for any of you for any of your listeners if they want to get it. It's called No Bad Parts. And internal family systems is a psychotherapy technique, and it really approaches the human and the human mind in parts. And so what we can see this as is a lot of us have conflicting thoughts and experiences. We can have a desire to be seen and visible in the world, but then we can also be really scared and not want to be seen because we're afraid people are going to judge us or shame us. And so, how can we be present with both of these experiences and both of these parts and get to know the truth? what is the truth of my soul? What have I been called here to do? And I think parts has really helped me to work with my clients, to understand myself, to have more kindness for people in my relationship with Lindsey. As an example, I can see in my life, if we've ever been in a fight or had an issue, it's like, oh, it's actually a part of me that feels, left out, or feels scared, or feels abandoned, or feels, angry at something, but it's not the truth of me. Again, the truth of me is I love her. I know her. We're committed to this growth together. So internal family systems, if anyone wants to learn about it, No Bad Parts is the book. Dick Schwartz is the teacher, and you can do it at therapy with your therapist or with an IFS practitioner. And that has been just my favorite thing that I've taken on.
Love that.
As you know, there have been so many. When we spoke to Glennon Doyle on the podcast, who's just so fun, such a bright light, so dynamic, she was talking about trusting ourselves. And I was going through a period during that time, honestly, most of my 20s, where I didn't trust myself. I was outsourcing my trust and intuition to other people. I trusted
Right.
other people's opinions and, experts more than my own knowing. And so she said something in a conversation we had that was something like, we stop trusting ourselves because we abandon ourselves when we feel pain. And
Mm,
she likened this to, if your friend came to you in pain, in a painful situation, would you abandon her? Would you be like, nah, sorry, can't deal with it, Google it, like can't be there for it? And it just struck me because I felt like I had abandoned myself so many times and just not been with myself in those moments of pain and discomfort and confusion. And I was so judgmental of myself. And in turn, just couldn't trust myself. You don't have it
yeah.
figured out. So how can I even trust you? And so it really flipped a switch for me where I started just practicing trusting myself in small moments. It didn't have to be like big life decisions, but just trusting myself to, say yes or no to a dinner with a group of friends, or
Right.
say yes to an opportunity or no to an opportunity, and just see what happened in its wake. So over, the course of the last decade, I've really built such a deep trust with myself. And I'm kind of in a new season as a mom where it's like the next level of trusting yourself, where your trust in yourself actually affects more than you, it affects your
Oh,
family.
yeah.
And, going through initiations with that too. But I think the foundation was laid in my late 20s.
Yeah. You absorb so much when you're in this position of like, having all
Yeah.
these different people, all this information that you soak up like a sponge, but you got to squeeze the sponge out and just keep what is sticking to you. And I know for me in the beginning of absorbing all this, it's like everything's new and incredible. And it really makes this huge impact in my brain. And then over the years, I'm hearing a lot of the same stuff. And maybe when I read a book now, it's like maybe one line sticks with me instead of every chapter like I did, in my 20s or something. So I'm curious to know what kind of universal truths have you seen and patterns, from your guests on the podcast that you feel like these are true for me and this is also kind of true for everybody else, it seems.
I think with all of our guests, and what I've realized is that we've sat with amazing leaders, teachers, speakers, some of the best and brightest in the business, and they still struggle with belief in themselves. They still don't feel like they have it all together. They still
Mm.
feel lost. They still doubt themselves. They still want more. And I remember meeting, you know, just one of my idols, like someone that's so powerful and so successful, so wealthy. You'd look and be like, oh, they're pinnacle, top of the top, creme de la creme. And sitting with them, and they were like, I'm worried about this launch. I'm worried about this thing. I'm nervous about this. And you're like, wait, what? You're where I want to be. You have the life that I want. Like, how is that possible? And it made me realize that in the human condition, we always want more. We always want to create more. We always seek to be better, to be more successful, to be all these things. And I've never met someone that felt like they had it all together and that felt like their life was perfect and that they were done and that, everything had worked out in the way that they wanted. And that's always struck me, is just sitting with people really and being like, oh, you're still nervous. you still have imposter syndrome and you still doubt yourself at times. And it's really helped humanize not only them, but myself in the process too, to be like, oh, it's okay to feel confused or lost or feel like I'm an imposter or feel like I'm not enough, because that's part of our human experience.
Great point.
I think
Absolutely.
I think another common thread is gratitude. A lot,
Yeah.
we talk about it a lot. Obviously, we've heard, let's share our gratitudes in the morning, the evening, write it in our journal. But talking to, these incredibly successful people, they have a practice of gratitude in one way or another.
Right.
Whether that is sharing gratitudes every day with their partner, or whether it's writing them down first thing in the morning, or, whether it's just declaring them, almost as a prayer to start their day. And, I can imagine, and we've experienced this, but I'm just thinking of these people who I like admire and who have had just so much success, where I'm like, wow, you know, your your reality can be a little bit distorted when there's that much success. And you can kind of
Yeah.
lose the plot on your life a little bit, right? It's like so fun, so great, so rewarding. And then you're like, wait, what's really important? Is it like the next million, or like am I
Right.
just grateful for like the connection with my family today? Or I think it seems that they desire simplification at points, and they
Mhm.
desire just like a rooting in what's true and real, because I can imagine, I feel like we've remained quite grounded throughout our process. But I can imagine in certain levels of success, like you get swept. And so I feel like everyone that we've met with that level of success who just feels so present and grounded has a practice of gratitude in their everyday.
Mhm. I would love to know how you both approach the situations where you wanna share a personal story on the podcast, but you know that if you do, it will maybe create some upset in your real lives, in your real personal lives. And I know for me, like, if I've gone through something that I think is valuable for other people to know, and I really wanna help them, I might bring a guest on to talk about it and maybe not let on that I have a whole lot of personal connection to it just for my own protection. I'm just curious to know if there's anything like that that you guys have to do for yourselves around, tough topics for you personally.
Yeah, did you ever, I'm curious just in your journey with this, because you've been doing this for a while too. Did you ever overshare
Oh,
at a
yeah.
time? Yeah.
I
Mhm.
learned the hard way, baby. So I just share differently. I might say things more vaguely, or I might really just have an expert or, some kind of, yeah, specialist share about something and just direct people to resources and hope that they look into it without sharing my personal stuff sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard because what the real answer is I struggle with this because people having the tangibility and having the applicability and that honesty and vulnerability is the intimacy. So
Yes.
if I'm
Yeah.
talking to my best friend on the couch and I'm like, yo, my mom did this and then this my ex did this and all that stuff, it's like that's real and true and there's a flow to that truth, and
Yeah.
I find myself when I censor, it kind of stops the flow a little bit. I'm like a little scared or trepidatious, and
Yeah.
it's kind of it's a little bit of a bummer in part of the process to feel like you have to censor and hold back. But also too, when I'm sharing something, it's truly my experience. And there are people in my life that are impacted by it. You know, people that I've dated, my family. Like, it's been interesting because, I've struggled so much in the relationship with my mom, and that's something I've been really open about in my process. And the mother wound is something I teach about and talk about, and was like a real big aspect of my healing. And the mother wound is basically our relationship to the feminine overall, to the feminine collective, and then to our mothers. Our mothers are like the first point of us in relationship in life. They're nourishment, they're everything. We learn from our mothers. So I
Yeah.
struggled with that because we didn't do that well. But it's actually been beautiful because she's obviously listened to some episodes and me talk about things, and it's deepened our relationship in a way where it's brought more truth and more honesty and more vulnerability.
Mm.
And I'm so grateful for it. I'm not saying that what I did was right or perfect, because it's probably caused her a lot of pain beyond what she shared with me. But it's actually given me a space to speak my truth in a way that could be heard. Because sometimes when we approach people and family members, we kind of come to them with this idea of what they're going to say, who they're going to be. They're always like this, they're always like that. And it's like given us a spaciousness around the truth where she can metabolize it and we can have deeper conversations with it. But it's a tricky path that we struggle with as podcasters. I know you do too. Lindsey struggled with herself and her own journey. And even people that aren't podcasters, just for your audience, I think as our society becomes more digital, we become more public online and social media, on podcasts, on TikTok, on Instagram, on blogs, in email. So much more things are documented about how we feel, about who we are, about how we show up in the world. And so I do believe that what we're going through, us three, is something that everyone is eventually going to think about if they haven't already.
Yeah.
I had my own experience with this, and it was with my family as well. And I was sharing much more in the beginnings of the podcast. And I think just slowly over time, whether it was that experience with my family, when I got together with my now husband, where, you know, I was able to understand more clearly the importance of privacy, intimacy, and like true connection with the people that I love. So
Right.
what it's really taught me, because I still do share, but I'm much more mindful.
Yeah.
Um, what it's taught me is that if I am sharing more on the podcast about these certain relationships than I am sharing with them in the actual relationship, something is out of balance.
Oh, great
Like
point.
if I
Yeah.
haven't discussed with my husband the thing I'm like talking about on the podcast, I don't feel comfortable with that. Um, Same with my family. And so that for me has become kind of a standard where I'm just checking in with the actual relationship, being like, is there a conversation to be had? Like, can we kind of get to a place of integration of the thing that we're kind of tending to before I share it on the podcast? And if it is like a thing to share, um, I am more apt to like just ask them permission now. Um, because people do listen, and I am very mindful of that. I didn't like how I
Mhm.
felt when they came to me and were like very hurt by it. At, at the same time, this brought up in them things they needed to work on as well.
Right.
So it's not just me being like, oh, I did something wrong, I gotta fix it, I gotta do better. It's like it brought up for both parties in these situations, you know, projections and insecurities and lack of communication that was not being, was not happening. Um, and it really provided like an opportunity for a little growth. And so I'm glad that happened.
Yeah.
But I think now as a mom too, I'm protective, maybe it's like a little more boring. But I'm just protective of like our peace as a family and just energetically, when there's a lot of eyes and ears, I think about that and just what that means for the people in my family.
Absolutely. I have a hard time with the line of like, this is my experience. This is what happened from my perspective. This is how I feel. This is mine to share. But
Yes.
how can I share it? I even asked my husband last night. I'm going to be on a podcast later, and I'm going to share about our relationship. I was like, what are you comfortable with me sharing or not sharing? And how could I say this in a different way without being super specific? To protect your feelings and our intimacy and stuff. It is this delicate dance that we kind of have to do now. I have just loved chatting with you both so much. Thank you for the honesty and vulnerability about this whole process that you guys have experienced. Is there anything that you'd like to leave people with as far as maybe, I don't know, a favorite quote or hack or something that you've learned throughout your many, many years of learning and implementing? And then, of course, we'll get into where people can find your work and all that stuff.
Kind of something that we were talking about before about sharing, like sharing openly and vulnerably, maybe for your audience. And this isn't like something I live by, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot. In 48 Laws of Power, the book,
Oh,
and I feel like a tech bro referencing it, but it talks about how one of the laws of power is to share enough so that people feel connected to you, but still not enough where people are like, you're vulnerable. So, as an example, what I've
oh,
noticed with some of the great speakers and teachers that we've had on the podcast is they will share something that is vulnerable, but not super exposing. So, as an example, with your husband, you
yeah,
could talk about, one of the things that we struggle with is he likes to wash the dishes before dinner. I like to do it after. And we had to figure out how to communicate. It's like, that's such a
yeah,
non big issue, but I feel intimate with you because you're sharing something about your home. But
Right.
in your heart, that's not something that you guys, that is like that big of an issue when we think about things. So I do think that there is something that we can think about where how can we still be teachers and still be vulnerable and still be truthful, but not really expose the relationships that we have, or, the people that don't want to be shared or exposed. But I think everything that we really learned is in the book. Our book is the spiritual guide to adulting. It's what we believe is going to help people go from feeling lost in their life, which was us at rock bottom, to lives that we love, lives that look very different than when we started. I was in a partnership that turned into a marriage. I was in the corporate world. Now I'm single. I am in an entrepreneurial job. Lindsey was single. Now she's married with a baby. So everyone's life that they love is going to look very different, especially when it's soul led. And I'm excited for people to really dig into it and see what they can create when they live that soul led life, after reading the book.
And I think a lot of people right now might feel a little bit stuck, whether you're in your late 20s or maybe you're in a season of life where you're like, I just don't feel movement or inspiration or connection in this area of my life. And, we have been there so many times. And oftentimes that stuckness is just a lack of connection with ourselves. And so I just really encourage people in these moments of feeling stuck, can you get just a little bit quieter? Can you unplug? Can you take moments for yourself during the day where you can connect with that like inner quiet, that inner knowing, that center of yourself, where I think you will be surprised so many answers live. But in this day and age where we have so many things vying for our attention, it is very rare that we connect there. And so if you can make that a practice and make that just your first point of, hey, I feel like I need an answer on this, or I feel like I need a little direction on this stuck thing. You'll go there first rather than scrolling through Instagram for the inspiration, or, uh, going to your favorite person's page for a quote that inspires you. See if going within holds that answer, or at the very least, just that next step.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And where can people find your work together and any individual work that you might want to plug?
Go to almost30.com. It's almost30.com. For anything for the podcast, we have, book information there too. Almost 30 is available wherever people get their books. And then I'm at It's Krista. So it's ITSKRISTA. I do retreats and I coach women. And then you can go to itskrista.com for any of that information.
And I'm at Lindsey Simcik on Instagram. Would love to talk to you all. And I'm just, I'm in this kind of in between yet again, and it feels really fun and exciting. I have a brand new mom on the block, and just having so much fun with bringing this book to the world. So yeah, I can't wait to connect with you all, hear about how you're loving the book.
Amazing. Well, this felt
You're-
like therapy
You're
for
such
me.
a good interviewer, Bill.
Oh,
gonna
thank
say,
you.
You did a great job.
You're such an amazing interviewer. Like, it's just such a pleasure to be with people that are such good podcasters, good communicators, great voices. And it's been so much fun. Like, this felt new and interesting. And I just feel really grateful to have been with you, and especially to get access to your audience, because I know that relationship is so special and they trust you and they know you. So it just is really meaningful to us to be able to be here.
Thank you guys so much. All right, everybody, go check out Almost 30, the book that releases tomorrow. And I hope you have a great rest of the day. Talk to you soon. So glad you tuned into Self-Helpless. If you felt supported by this or past episodes, there are a couple ways you can help the show. Feel free to share it with a friend who may enjoy the variety of discussions we have here. Also, you can become a monthly or annual supporter of the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/selfhelpless. That's where you can pitch and vote on topics, submit questions for special guests, or be a silent supporter and not participate in any of that. 100% of Patreon and merch proceeds go directly to operating expenses that not only keep the show going through thick and thin, but also keeps it accessible to all with minimal ads. If you want to show a little extra love in, you can leave an Apple Podcast review or send an email to share how Self-Helpless has impacted you. All of this info and more goodies can be found at selfhelplesspodcast.com. All right, love you big time, and thank you so much.